It's my pleasure now to introduce Professor Mohammed Sobh, Dr. Mohammed Ghani Al-Tali, and he will be speaking about thrombotic microangiopathy in transplant recipients.
أنا دايما أحب أشارك في تقديم الدكتور محمد صبحي وحضرتك دكتور مايز. دكتور محمد صبحي is actual scientist and lecturer وأستاذ وبروفيسور، يعني هو عالم وباحث ومن الناس البايونيرز في الميديكال ريسيرش، وله طبعا a lot of contributions to the stem cell therapy، وكان عملنا مؤتمر مهم جدا على الرينال ريجنريشن، ودايما التوكس بتاعته بتبقى فيري انفورماتيف ونستفاد دايما منه. اتفضل.
متشكرين قوي، واحنا الناس قد حاجه اشكرك هذه المقدمه. يعني انا في البدايه احب ان اشكر البورد بتاع الجامعه المصريه for the great activity this board is doing in this period of time, especially the educational activity of our Society of Nephrology, Egyptian Society of Nephrology. Also, I would like to express my thanks for Dr. Maher Fouad for his talent to keep this meeting, the annual meeting, transplantation meeting, and for inviting me to participate in this today activity. The talk of Professor Gina was very helpful to me, as she gave a very good introduction regarding the background and pathogenesis of thrombotic microangiopathy. And today I'm going to focus on thrombotic microangiopathy in kidney transplantation. But of course, when I was preparing for the meeting, I was not aware that there will be some production or another lecture as great as that. So I put a few slides about this. I'd like to say that thrombotic microangiopathy is characterized by acute syndrome of microangiopathic hemolytic anemia, thrombocytopenia, and variable signs of organ damage, many organ damage, and all these is ischemic in nature due to platelet thrombosis in the microcirculation. Depending on the predominant distribution of lesions, kidney or central nervous system, two pathologically identical, they are pathologically identical, but clinical distinctive entities are described. We know the hemolytic uremic syndrome, when the kidney is the dominant, and TTP, thrombotic microangiopathy, when the brain is predominant. Hemolytic uremic syndrome usually affects young children and is characterized by acute kidney injury and absence or minimal neurological abnormality. On the opposite side, TTP occurs more in adults and is characterized by severe neurological involvement in most cases and little or variable renal involvement. But it has been reported in some cases patients may have some feature from both hemolytic and TTP may coexist. So this is the definition of the condition. But if you focus more, as our nephrologists, on hemolytic uremic syndrome, it is a frequent cause of renal failure, especially in children. Most cases are diarrhea positive, we say diarrhea positive hemolytic uremic syndrome, and are usually related to, of course, exotoxin produced by E. coli, Shiga toxin. Also, there are cases not associated with diarrhea, we say diarrhea negative hemolytic uremic syndrome. Rarely, hemolytic uremic syndrome may occur in several members of the same family. We say familial hemolytic uremic syndrome with an autosomal dominant or recessive inheritance. In these cases, the disease may present in neonatal age or in the adulthood. About 30 to 50% of diarrhea-negative hemolytic uremic syndrome have mutation in one of the complement control protein, especially factor H, factor I, or membrane cofactor protein. So, if we would like to classify, we can say thrombotic microangiopathy is the main type, and the very common type we meet in our community is the infection related, especially, of course, Shiga-toxin-associated hemolytic uremic syndrome, but also the second important type of infection, neuraminidase positive associated thrombotic microangiopathy by streptococcal pneumonia infection. And also many other infections can cause this type, such as HIV, polyomavirus, CMV, and many other viruses. The second category is the TTP associated with genetic or immune-mediated metalloprotease enzyme abnormality. Also, there is hemolytic uremic syndrome associated with genetic or immune-mediated abnormalities in the complement system. These are many types. In spite, it is rare in our community, but it is important if you are going to treat patients properly. Also, there is another category which we meet also frequently, the pregnancy-associated thrombotic microangiopathy, which could be DTB, HELLP syndrome, or postpartum hemolytic uremic syndrome. Also, there are many diseases which are associated or provocate for thrombotic microangiopathy, especially antiphospholipid syndrome, scleroderma, malignant hypertension, and many types of malignancy. And also, there is category of thrombotic microangiopathy induced by many drugs. And today, we are going to discuss the last issue, which is transplantation-associated thrombotic microangiopathy, which could be de novo or recurrent. If we come to kidney transplantation thrombotic microangiopathy, I would like to say hemolytic uremic syndrome, of course we know may develop de novo, and this is the very common, the common case which we meet in our practice, de novo after transplantation, or it is recurrent, may occur in a patient whose primary cause of end-stage renal failure was hemolytic uremic syndrome. The time from transplantation to diagnosis of TMA is variable. It has been reported to be between just few days to years after transplantation. So this is that different mechanisms are involved in the pathogenesis of this condition. If I'm going to focus on de novo type, and this is the common type which we need, the reported incidence of de novo thrombotic microangiopathy in kidney transplantation varies considerably. If we look to the United States data, de novo thrombotic microangiopathy was reported to be only 0.8% of their cases. But of course, however, this rate may be underestimated, as a single center studies reported an incidence ranging from 4 up to 14%. This, of course, due to a number of factors, may increase the risk of developing thrombotic microangiopathy after kidney transplantation, and in our practice daily we need any of these conditions, such as marginal kidney, presence of cytomegalovirus infection, parvovirus B19 infection, BK polyomavirus infection, antiphospholipid antibodies, anticarbamazepine, HCV patient also can be subject to this condition, and in presence of malignancy. Rarely, drugs such as valacyclovir and clopidogrel green in ischemic patient, cardiac patient with cardiac ischemia might also cause TMA. However, the most important risk factor are by far represented by calcineurin inhibitor, and recently anti-mTOR drugs are involved in pathogenesis of this condition. So our patient always suffering from predisposing factor which can lead to de novo thrombotic microangiopathy. These mechanisms are those initiated by calcineurin to induce thrombotic microangiopathy, such as vasoconstriction, due to reduction of both prostacyclin sensitive and prostacyclin to thromboxane A2 ratio, decreased generation of activated equity C, increased production and release of high molecular weight bone membrane factor, which is sticky, causing stiffness attachment of platelet with vascular endothelium. All these factors, cyclosporin and calcineurin inhibitor, play a role in it. Concomitant ischemia, reperfusion, and its deleterious effect on endothelium. And high dose of cyclosporin also further augment the deleterious effect on the endothelium, causing thrombotic microangiopathy. mTOR inhibitors. This is a new drug, but it was found to be serious, as they may act as a subsequent aggressor. Why? And it has been demonstrated that sirolimus and mTOR inhibitors may induce down-regulation of vascular endothelial growth factor, which is required for repair of calcium urine inhibitor and thrombotic microangiopathy damage. So it can aggravate the condition. Also, renal ischemia by itself is an initiating event for development of thrombotic microangiopathy. Pulmonary ischemia is a pro-apoptotic, we know. And so it can lead to thrombotic microangiopathy. After reperfusion, contact between apoptotic microvascular endothelial cells and blood constituents cause activation of platelet and occurrence of thrombotic microangiopathy alongside with acute tubular necrosis during renal transplantation without significant association with HLA mismatch or patient sensitization. And this paper is an article which has been published in 2010 documenting or reporting the thrombotic microangiopathy occurring in a patient treated by everolimus after transplantation. Okay, acute vascular rejection also that damages the endothelium, the cells should always be considered in the differential diagnosis of post-transplant thrombotic microangiopathy, in particular when tubules and interstitial infiltration are accompanied by severe endovasculitis affecting the entire renal allograft vasculature. Distinction between post-transplant thrombotic microangiopathy and acute vascular rejection is extremely difficult on clinical ground and is confirmed only on renal biopsy. Both cases are associated with acute renal failure, microangiopathic hemolytic anemia, and thrombocytopenia as well. Also, here, viruses, there are many viruses can play a role in the pathogenesis, especially parvovirus B19. Also, we have to know that exposure to agents that are toxic to the vascular endothelium, such as viruses, bacteria, immune complex, autoantibodies, cytotoxic drugs, all can initiate local intravascular thrombosis. Now, if we come to the recurrent type of thrombotic microangiopathy, we know that kidney transplantation is an effective and safe for those children with Shiga toxin-induced microangiopathy, which end by end-stage renal failure. The recurrence rate ranged from 0 to 10%, and the graft survival at 10 years is even better than in pediatric transplant recipient with other primary renal disease. So, the very common type of thrombotic microangiopathy in our patients, when it recurs in the graft, it is not a problem. It is not a major problem. But the other types, mutation in the circulating complement factor H and IMP and complement 3, all of which are mainly produced by the liver, will persist after kidney transplantation, resulting in post-transplant recurrence in 80% of patients with mutation in the gene encoding complement factor F and I. Recurrence rate in patients with complement factor B or C3 mutation are less well established. And this table shows the recurrence rate. We see here the Shiga toxin induced, the recurrence is negligible, and this is the other type, the atypical type of hemolytic uremic syndrome. This is very common. We need battery. We have to charge this. It is not working. Yeah, okay. As well, you have to. It's a time factor. الشاهد ايه بس بالظبط؟ ما انا عارف عاوز اقلل الشرايح. 5 دقايق. من هنا؟ Amen? Okay. In the case of end-stage renal failure, okay. Is hemolytic uremic syndrome, its recurrent is negligible for childhood type diarrhea positive, and the outcome of kidney transplantation is good. As I said, with recurrence 0 to 10%. In other type, non-Shiga toxin hemolytic uremic syndrome, approximately 5-50% of renal transplant patients develop recurrence of the disease in the allograft, while the recurrence rate is nearly 100% in familial and recurrent hemolytic uremic syndrome. The 1 year graft survival is about 80% after childhood and less than 30% in adulthood, being atypical. Liver-related transplantation is associated with an increased risk of recurrence, probably suggesting a genetic familial predisposition. Of course, if the donor from the same family, he will have the same defect. If we come to the pathology, I will go quickly through this. It has been described very elegantly by Professor Telina. You see, I'd like to show only this is the electron microscopy. It shows this is the endothelial cells. It is detached from the basement membrane, and this space is full of fluffy material. This is very important. It is mainly endothelial pathology, and this is the arteriolar change with thrombosis. And this is a case of cytomegalovirus infection complicated by thrombotic microangiopathy, showing the fibrin deposits, the vascular thrombosis, capillary thrombosis. And this is another case in which thrombotic microangiopathy was induced by tacrolimus prograph. We can see here, this is the fibrin deposit, this thrombi, the collapsed tuft, the urinary space is increased. And here, at the same time, if you look to the tubule, you find the isometric vacuolization of the tubule due to calcineurin toxicity. And being a graft with impaired kidney function, you have to consider vascular rejection. And here this is the C4D staining by immunoperoxidase section. It is negative, so it is not vascular rejection. It is calcineurin prograft-induced thrombotic microangiopathy. A clinical presentation, the time from transplantation to diagnosis thrombotic microangiopathy is variable. It has been reported between few days to years after transplantation, suggesting different mechanisms are involved. The clinical presentation after transplantation is variable. It is often manifested clinically as hemolytic uremic syndrome with the classical finding of renal failure, hemolytic anemia, schistocyte, thrombocytopenia with worsening renal function or delayed graft function if it occurred very early. But a localized thrombotic microangiopathy with no systemic manifestation will present with worsening renal function, delayed graft function, with a few or no systemic manifestation, no thrombocytopenia or anemia. This will be a problem to reach diagnosis. Renal dysfunction can be the only finding, and acute rejection, cyclosporin, tacrolimus toxicity, cytomegalovirus infection, all can come into the differential diagnosis. The radiograph to us is strongly influenced by whether the thrombotic microangiopathy is systemic or localized. If it is systemic, it will be bad. If it is localized, the prognosis will be better. This is the prognosis of recurrent thrombotic microangiopathy is poor, especially of course we are talking about the atypical type, not the Shiga toxin related. The United States data report patient survival of 50% at 3 years. In a review in this publication, a review of 24 patients had renal transplantation for thrombotic hemolytic uremic syndrome. The 2-year graft survival was only 35%, but eventually all patients with recurrent lost their graft. So recurrent cases, especially atypical, the prognosis is not good, but prognosis of de novo is less severe than the recurrent. It may depend on the severity of the histologic lesion and the clinical feature. Prognosis is more favorable when thrombotic microangiopathy occurs later in post-transplantation course, or will it affect recipient of any graft from living donor? Here we are talking about who, not the recurrent type. Graft loss is rare in patients with thrombotic microangiopathy localized to the graft, while patients with systemic sign and symptom of hemolytic uremic syndrome are more likely to need dialysis, and to lose allograft function. If we come to the treatment, of course, withdrawal of the cause and treatment of the residual factor are the most effective approach. Plasma exchange as the mainstay is the mainstay for treatment. Effectiveness, it is highly effective since you will remove this enzyme. You will remove the inhibitor for this enzyme and you will compensate for the loss.
عايز كام دقيقة؟
عاوز 5 دقايق. هم مش اساسا we are bargaining for time. Okay, so withdrawal, plasma exchange, drug withdrawal or dose reduction of the calcium urine can be effective up to 50% or more, and if you mix the calcium urine withdrawal and you plasma exchange, you will get up to 84%. Dose reduction, withdrawal, and conversion, of course, this can subject the patient to rejection, so it is not an easy task. Sirolimus was associated with good outcome in patients with cyclosporin or tacrolimus associated hemolytic uremic. The outcome of Dinavo falls occurring in the setting of viral infection is strongly influenced by a response to treatment. If you eradicate the virus, of course, you will succeed in treating this patient. And here, this slide shows that regarding atypical, these are the new treatment modality. Plasmapheresis, generous plasma infusion may increase the level of the loss factor H and I, and obtain recovery of thrombotic microangiopathy and thrombotic anemia in some patients, but are only rarely effective in preventing renal damage. However, prevention of relapse and prevention of preservation of renal function have been obtained in a renal transplant child. This is a case record with prophylactic plasmapheresis twice weekly for a very long time. They succeeded with the child to transplant a patient with life-threatening recurrent thrombotic microangiopathy resistant to multiple course of plasma exchange were rescued by administration of intravenous IVIG and rituximab. These are new drug treatment in case reports. In order to restore effective factor H, combine liver and kidney transplantation. This has been reported many times, but you need very aggressive plasma exchange before and during and after liver transplantation, otherwise the liver will be damaged. Other less invasive treatment strategies to prevent recurrence of atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome is to use eculizumab, either prophylactic or therapeutic. There are many reports in this story, and this article report on the liver and kidney in treatment of atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome. And this another article using benaticid, in which this is one case report published in 2009. They succeeded when the patient developed hemolytic uremic syndrome. They stopped calcium urine in 2 minutes. Benaticid, they discontinued calcium urine and put the patient in benaticid treatment, and they can rescue the graft. 2 years later, another article which reported on use benaticid in 3 other patients. They use the same. They stop calcium urine. They put patient in benaticid, and they can keep the transplant for more than 1 year when they reported. And this report about eculizumab, either as a prophylactic or therapeutic, for transplant patient with atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome. And this is the eculizumab case. You see this is the classic thrombotic microangiopathy with fibrine necrosis and deposits. And this is after eculizumab treatment. This biopsy has been taken 3 months after treatment with eculizumab. So I would like to say at the end, if to treat the patient with recurrent with thrombotic microangiopathy in a kidney transplant, patient at high risk of thrombotic microangiopathy recurrence should be initially avoid those immunosuppressive drugs such as calcineurin and indole, and in their treatment, a possible strategy is to follow induction by anti-CD25 monoclonal and give the patient steroid and mofetil. In the case of recurrence, plasma exchange twice weekly and IVIG could be of help. In resistant cases, we may use rituximab as a rescue treatment. And thank you all.
Thank you very much, Professor Muhammad, and we will please co-chair the session, please.
Thank you.
The questions at the end of the session.
Okay, now we move to the last presentation, and